Beneath the headlines and battlefield maps, there were secrets buried deeper than graves, stories hidden in shadow, too dangerous to tell aloud. In the ashes of World War II, not every weapon was a gun, and not every hero wore a uniform. What you're about to hear was never meant to survive, and yet, it did. The wind howled across the jagged fjords of northern Norway, its icy breath sweeping over the white wasteland. In the village of Romsdalen, nestled against the Vinterfjell mountains, only the faint glow of kerosene lamps hinted at life. It was January 1943. Nazi boots had long since marched across the valleys, seizing the ports, the railways, and the people. But deep in the snow-covered highlands, a resistance had been growing, quiet, patient, and cold as the grave. They called themselves Isbjornin, the Ice Bears. No official record ever documented their existence. No medals were awarded, no parades held. But to those who knew the mountains, their whispers endured. Composed of reindeer-herding Sami tribesmen, escaped Soviet prisoners, and 2 special operations executive, SOE agents dropped by parachute into a blizzard, they became the unbreakable thorn in the Reich's northern flank. At the center of it all was Nils Lemmet, a tall, grizzled Sami elder with eyes like flint. Nils had once been a tracker and guide before the war, leading scientists and cartographers through unforgiving terrain. Now, he led sabotage teams through Nazi patrols. His reindeer herd served as cover. He was just another old man, delivering meat and hides. The Germans underestimated him. They wouldn't again. Everything changed when the British inserted Captain Andrew Faulkner and Sergeant Joanna Bell into the region. Their mission was clear: identify and cripple the German heavy water transport lines connected to the Vemork plant. Nazi Germany's atomic program depended on deuterium oxide, and much of it passed through frozen rail lines winding beneath Vinterfjell. Nils found the agents half-frozen, buried in a snowdrift after a parachute drop gone wrong. He and his niece, Anya, rescued them with sleighs and medicinal moss wrapped in sealskin. Communication was difficult at first. Faulkner spoke fractured Norwegian, Bell relied on codebooks. But Nils didn't need words. He had war in his bones, and when he saw the frostbitten maps they carried, he nodded. He knew where the tracks were. He knew where they could strike. The first mission came in February. Disguised as a meat delivery to a Wehrmacht outpost, Nils and Anya brought Faulkner close to the supply tunnel near Fjellstrom Bridge. While Nils kept the guards distracted with stories of wolves and stolen sleds, Faulkner slipped under the bridge, planted charges, and disappeared into the trees. The explosion echoed across the valley like thunder. The next shipment of heavy water never made it past the gorge. In the months that followed, the Isbjornin struck repeatedly, cutting telegraph wires, derailing trains, intercepting convoys. Their most daring act came during what became known as the Blizzard Run. A captured German officer had confessed that a major shipment of enriched heavy water was being rushed to the coast by armored sled. The Ice Bears had 3 hours to intercept it, in a storm so brutal even ravens fell from the sky. 10 of them rode out: Nils, Anya, Faulkner, Bell, and 6 local fighters. They used old reindeer trails, winding through pine forests caked in snow and silence. Just before dawn, the team waited beneath a ridge as the sleds approached, escorted by 2 Panzer Grenadiers on skis. Faulkner, camouflaged in white, crawled forward and cut a wire across the trail. When the lead sled hit it, the vehicle flipped, throwing men and cargo into a heap. Before the Germans could react, shots cracked like breaking ice. Bell's rifle took down one of the skiers. Anya used her grandfather's bow, loosing a silent arrow into another man's throat. The crates were burned. The surviving Germans, disoriented and frostbitten, were left alive but tied in their underwear to a tree. "Let Berlin hear about the bears," Nils said. And Berlin did. In retaliation, the Germans turned savage. They raided Romsdalen, torching cabins and executing villagers. Anya's mother was among them. She was found in the ruins of her home, still holding a rosary carved from reindeer antler. Nils didn't speak for days. When he finally did, he ordered the relocation of the entire resistance into the high caves of Juthaven. There, the Ice Bears became shadows. They used smoke holes to cook underground, trained messengers to run barefoot over ice, and built radio antennas from scavenged wire and elk antlers. Bell taught local girls how to operate Morse code, and together they kept London informed of every German movement. Faulkner, increasingly gaunt, grew obsessed with preventing an Allied disaster he'd only recently learned of, rumors of Nazi plans to detonate a test bomb in northern Sweden. In March 1944, the SOE intercepted a chilling code, Einheit Morgenrot. Operation Red Dawn. A final, desperate test of Nazi nuclear potential. The site was a fortified fjord facility known as Calden's Point, unreachable by air, protected by fjord mines, and guarded by a battalion of Waffen-SS. The British believed it impossible to reach. But Nils had a route. It was a forgotten glacier tunnel, used only by ancient hunters in pre-Roman times. The descent would take 16 hours, through vertical ice shafts and collapsing caverns. 7 volunteered: Nils, Anya, Faulkner, Bell, and 3 partisans. Only 4 emerged on the other side. They infiltrated the compound under cover of fog and snow. Bell set charges along the cliffside pipeline. Faulkner planted explosives beneath the lab's foundation. Anya lured the patrols away with reindeer decoys fitted with noisemakers. But in the final moments, the group was discovered. A firefight erupted. Faulkner was hit in the thigh. Bell dragged him behind a snowbank, then pressed the remote detonator into his hand. "You started this," she said. "You end it." She charged the remaining guards to buy time. The fjord shook as the explosives ignited. Fire swallowed the lab, the docks, the entire mountain face. The explosion lit up the Arctic night like a second sunrise. Only 2 escaped, Anya and Faulkner, both frostbitten and bleeding. They were recovered days later by a British trawler. London never publicly acknowledged the operation, but SOE archives declassified in 1996 confirmed the attack crippled Nazi nuclear progress. Nils Lemmet was never seen again. Some say he died in the caves, others believe he returned to the tundra alone, choosing the snow over silence. Anya settled in Tromsø after the war, teaching schoolchildren to ski and read poetry. In her home hung a single item, a carved bear of driftwood, its paws wrapped in wire. And when the wind howls over the Vinterfjell, locals still say you can hear skis slicing through the snow, and distant voices singing in a tongue older than the Reich. The ice bears never stopped watching. In the heart of Nazi-occupied Warsaw, behind the broken facade of the university's once grand botanical department, a greenhouse stood untouched, not because it held strategic value, but because it appeared useless. Its glass panes were fractured. Weeds thrived in the damp. German officers dismissed it as a ruin. But beneath the vines and silence, life was being saved. Dr. Elżbieta Nowak had once dreamed of cataloging every native plant of Poland. Before the war, her lectures at Warsaw University drew standing audiences. She spoke of the healing power of yarrow, the symbolic weight of linden trees, and the resilience of moss. When the Germans invaded, they closed the university. Many professors were arrested. Elżbieta, spared perhaps because of her gender or perceived irrelevance, vanished into the rubble, retreating to her greenhouse and to her roots. At first, she used the space for preserving endangered species. Then came a knock in the night. A child, no older than 7, cradled in a blanket soaked with snow and blood. He was Jewish. His mother, a doctor in the ghetto, had begged a courier to take him before she was deported. The courier knew of the botanist. "She helps things grow," he'd said. Elżbieta did not hesitate. She cleared out an old potting shed in the rear. She fed the boy boiled roots and dried berries. When Gestapo patrols wandered too close, she disguised him with a burlap sack and told them he was her mute apprentice. She gave him a name, Jacek, after her brother lost in the siege. Word spread. Over the next year, the greenhouse became a sanctuary. Hidden among crates of fertilizer were children, messengers, and resistance fighters. Elżbieta created compartments beneath soil beds and inside compost bins. Her botanical texts, still neatly shelved, concealed forged documents. She pressed leaves not for study, but to wrap coded messages. Lavender meant safe passage, nettles meant danger. The resistance grew to depend on her. But danger always bloomed where hope took root. One evening in 1942, Elżbieta was visited by Father Wojciech, a priest from Praga. He brought with him 2 teenage girls, one wounded from a shrapnel blast, the other pregnant. Elżbieta admitted them, treating the wound with poultices of crushed plantain and goldenrod. She delivered the child herself, in a corner of the greenhouse beneath a fig tree. The infant never cried, a miracle, or perhaps intuition. Still, the net drew tighter. German patrols increased. A colonel took residence in the mansion nearby. He fancied himself a gentleman, often strolling the neighborhood with a monocle and walking cane. One day, he appeared at the greenhouse. "I studied botany in Heidelberg," he said, brushing his gloved hand over a wilted fern. "It is a pity this place has fallen into disrepair." Elżbieta smiled thinly. Wars are hard on gardens. He visited often after that, usually alone, asking questions about soil and species. Once, he brought coffee. She accepted. She could not risk offense. Jasiek served them tea, never looking up. The colonel never seemed to suspect a thing. Or so she hoped. In early spring 1943, disaster struck. One of the boys hiding in the greenhouse, a courier named Marchin, was captured during a raid. Under torture, he revealed locations, names, safe houses, including hers. The Gestapo came at dawn. Elżbieta had prepared for this. She trained the children to flee through a hidden trapdoor beneath the largest planter, which opened to the old university sewer lines. She set fire to her records, tore apart her coded herbariums, and handed Jasiek a small velvet pouch. "Take this to the librarian," she whispered. "She'll know what to do." The pouch contained her last pressed flower, a white narcissus, symbol of remembrance. The Gestapo shattered the door. They beat her, demanded names. She gave none. They smashed the glass, overturned soil, kicked over pots. When they found the trapdoor, it was empty. Elżbieta was dragged into the street, accused of aiding Jews, traitors, and partisans. The colonel watched from across the road, expression unreadable. She was taken to Pauillac prison. What happened next is shrouded in uncertainty. Some say she was executed within a week. Others claim she escaped during a prisoner transfer, aided by a guard whose daughter she had once treated. A post-war letter from France, unsigned, written in her style and riddled with botanical metaphors, arrived at the university library in 1946. It read simply, **, some roots survive the winter. Not all gardens die. **. After the war, survivors returned to Warsaw. The university was rebuilt. The greenhouse, miraculously still standing, was restored by former students and members of the Home Army. In 1952, a hidden compartment was discovered behind a wall of ivy. Inside were dried flowers, pressed with immaculate care, each labeled in both Latin and code. Among them was a child's drawing of a woman with glasses, standing among sunflowers, hand in hand with a boy labeled Jasiek. The Warsaw Institute of Natural History named its herbarium after her. But the real memorial stands in the greenhouse itself, where a white narcissus blooms every spring, fed by the soil where silence once grew. The journal was discovered in 1974, buried beneath volcanic ash and rubble in a sealed ammunition crate near the cliffs of Okinawa. Faded ink on rice paper pages. A wooden binding scorched but intact. The diary belonged to Hiroshi Takeda, a 19-year-old conscript of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service, last recorded as missing on April 5, 1945. What follows is reconstructed from his own words, recovered photographs, and accounts from those who remember a young man whose destiny was written in the sky, and defied in silence. March 3, 1945. *, they call us the cherry blossoms. Beautiful, fleeting, gone before we touch the ground. I do not feel like a blossom. I feel like ash. *. Hiroshi Takeda was born in Nagano Prefecture, a quiet child of rice farmers. He had a love of drawing, particularly cranes and waves. When his older brother died at Guadalcanal, Hiroshi was the only son left. In 1944, he was drafted. His parents wept but bowed, as tradition demanded. He trained at Chuchiura Naval Air Base, where cadets were fed propaganda with their rice, films of American devils, lectures on the emperor's divinity, and poems about sacrifice. Each morning, Hiroshi saluted the sun. Each night, he studied flight patterns and sketched birds in the margins of his notebooks. It was during a medical check that he met Hana, a Korean nurse assigned to his squadron. Her Japanese was broken, her posture rigid with fear, but her touch was gentle. She treated his sprained wrist. He offered her a drawing. She hesitated, then accepted. From that moment, they exchanged notes, hidden in mess tins, between folded bandages, inside books of poetry. In a world of death, their words became a secret garden. March 14, 1945. She gave me a paper crane. She said her grandmother made them during the occupation. I told her my favorite word in kanji is quiet. We speak in silence. In late March, Hiroshi was transferred to the 72nd Shinpu Special Attack Unit. Kamikaze, Divine Wind. Their mission, defend Okinawa with their bodies. Aircraft barely held together with spare parts were fitted with 250 kilograms bombs. Pilots were told to write letters to their families. Some carved farewell haikus into their cockpits. Hiroshi's final letter was brief. Forgive me. If I could choose, I would plant trees. April 1, 1945. Hiroshi's squadron was deployed to Kanoya Air Base. He was scheduled to fly on the 5th. The night before, he found Hana waiting behind the fuel depot. She handed him a box wrapped in cloth. Inside, pickled plums, a scrap of red silk, and a note. If you must die, take the crane with you. It will remember what they forget. That night, Hiroshi opened his diary for the last time. April 4, 1945. The captain gave us sake and oranges. One boy vomited. I looked at the stars and thought of waves. I am afraid, but not of death. I am afraid I'll become what they want me to be. A weapon without memory. At dawn, his squadron launched. The mission was simple. Find the American fleet, dive into the nearest aircraft carrier, and die. One by one, the planes rose like ghosts. Hiroshi was in the final wave. But somewhere over the East China Sea, something changed. A storm had rolled in from the north, throwing waves like fists. Visibility dropped. Radios crackled. Hiroshi, gripping the control stick, glanced at the crane Hana had tucked beside his compass. He saw the ocean below, black and endless. He saw the storm clouds ahead. He banked sharply, away from the fleet, away from the coordinates. Eyewitness reports from American pilots that day mention an unarmed Zero peeling off from the formation, disappearing into cloud cover. The assumption was mechanical failure. None pursued. Hiroshi flew until his fuel ran low. Then he descended toward a volcanic island north of Okinawa, one the Japanese had abandoned early in the war. He crash-landed on a rocky beach, breaking his ankle. For days, he hid in a lava cave, surviving on plums and rainwater. There, he wrote the final entries of his diary. April 7, 1945. I am not a ghost yet. My body aches, but I feel no shame. I will not kill to be remembered. I will remember instead. April 10, 1945. I buried the crane beneath the banyan tree. Perhaps it will fly again. Perhaps she will know I lived. No one ever saw Hiroshi again. The island was never reoccupied. The war ended 4 months later. Japan surrendered after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tens of thousands of kamikaze pilots perished. Only a handful, like Hiroshi, went missing without confirmed death. In 1974, a fisherman discovered the cave entrance after an earthquake exposed the old wreckage. The crate containing the diary had been sealed in wax and hidden beneath stones. Alongside it was a hand-carved figure of a crane and a strip of red silk. Today, Hiroshi Takeda's diary is preserved in the Peace Museum in Hiroshima. A copy of his drawings, cranes, waves, and one sketch of a nurse's eyes sits beside it. Some call him a deserter, others a survivor. But in his own words, he was simply a boy who chose memory over martyrdom. And every year, on April 5th, a single paper crane is placed at the foot of his display case. They called her Threadneedle, not for her stitching, but for the way she threaded her Spitfire through enemy fire like a needle through silk. Her name was Evelyn Parkhurst, a seamstress from Eastbourne who stitched uniforms by day and flew warbirds by night. At least, that's how the legend went. The truth, as it emerged decades later, was even stranger. Evelyn was 26 when the war began, the daughter of a widowed tailor and a self-taught pilot. Her mother had once been a suffragette. Her father, who died in 1938, left her a sewing machine and a half share in his tailor's shop. She used both to earn a quiet living mending uniforms and RAF coveralls, until the Battle of Britain brought the Luftwaffe to her doorstep. Eastbourne was bombed frequently. By 1940, her shop was rubble, and her sewing moved to a basement beneath the town's Women's Voluntary Service headquarters. She began repairing parachutes and flying suits, earning the attention of local RAF personnel with her precision and calm. Among them was Flight Lieutenant Charles Chaz Redford, a grinning, sharp-nosed Canadian pilot with a taste for whiskey and poetry. He noticed her work. Then he noticed her. One night, after a bombing raid left a dozen Spitfires scorched and several pilots injured, Chaz brought Evelyn to the edge of RAF Biggin Hill. He'd seen her examining cockpits, quizzing mechanics, sketching throttle assemblies in her notebooks. "Ever flown one of these beauties?" he asked. "Only in my head," she said. "I have a license. Cessna and dreams." He smuggled her onto the base again the next week. Then again. She took the simulator at night, flew low over the chalk cliffs in training rigs. When a pilot was too drunk to fly one morning, Evelyn took the Spitfire up and returned without a scratch. By 1941, the Air Transport Auxiliary, desperate for ferry pilots, had begun accepting women. But Evelyn couldn't apply. She'd been denied on medical grounds years before due to a congenital heart murmur. Quietly, Chaz and a few trusted ground crewmen gave her a false identity. Evelyn Palmer, born in Manchester, cleared by forged medical documents. Threadneedle was born. She ferried planes under cover of night, her face obscured beneath goggles and scarf. She never spoke on the air, claiming radio failure. She delivered over 20 Spitfires, 6 Hurricanes, and 1 Mosquito bomber. Never once did she crash. She stitched at dawn, flew at dusk, slept rarely. In late 1942, disaster struck. Chaz was shot down over France. Missing, presumed dead. Evelyn unraveled. She left the WVS. She flew more frequently, faster, closer to the front. Her logbook was always filled under another woman's name. Then came Operation Starkwing, a little-known mission involving modified reconnaissance Spitfires meant to intercept coded German signals near the French coast. It was suicidal. One of the pilots, a nervous 19-year-old named Jack Mills, refused to fly after a training malfunction. Evelyn volunteered in his place. Disguised again as Wren E. Palmer, she launched from a clandestine runway near Dover on March 3, 1943. Her orders were to fly to Calais, activate the onboard radio decoder, and return before German radar detected her. She never returned. British command assumed her plane had been shot down over the channel. No wreckage was found. Her secret was kept. Her name was never written into the logs. Palmer was listed as Kia. Decades passed. Then, in 1986, a group of amateur divers discovered a Spitfire submerged off the Normandy coast, surprisingly intact. Inside, they found a rusted helmet, a broken transmitter, and a sealed canvas flight bag containing a set of tailor's needles, a thimble, and a faded photograph of Chaz Redford. Aviation historians, using serial numbers and part records, traced the plane to one requisitioned under Operation Starkwing. It matched the aircraft Evelyn flew. It took 3 more years of interviews, document analysis, and testimony from elderly ground crew to piece together the truth. In 1992, the Royal Air Force posthumously acknowledged Evelyn Parkhurst as the unnamed pilot of Starkwing 17. Her logbook was recovered from an attic trunk by her niece, filled with sketches of aircraft stitched in thread. One page read, "Asterisk, the sky is cloth. I will cut it to my shape." Asterisk. Today, a bronze plaque bearing her true name rests at Biggin Hill Memorial Museum, reading simply, Evelyn Parkhurst, 1914 to 1943. Seamstress. Smuggler. Spitfire pilot. She flew unseen, so others might be seen. Asterisk asterisk. In the ruined city of Lviv, where libraries burned and languages were forbidden, a man named Tomasz Mazer waged war with ink, paper, and silence. He never held a rifle, never threw a grenade, and yet the Nazis feared him more than some entire partisan bands. They called him Der Schattenleser, the shadow reader. To the Jews hiding in the city's sewer tunnels, he was simply Tomek the Whisper. Tomasz had once been a quiet academic, the head archivist at the Ossolineum Library, one of Eastern Europe's oldest cultural institutions. Before the war, he spent his days cataloging old manuscripts, translating lost Slavic texts, and teaching German Romanticism to sleepy students. When the Soviets invaded Lviv in 1939, they closed the library, exiled professors, and burned counter-revolutionary literature. When the Nazis arrived 2 years later, they finished the job. But Tomasz remained. Hidden in plain sight, he was permitted to stay as a clerk for the new German-controlled library office, relegated to organizing propaganda pamphlets and German textbooks. The Nazis had no idea who they'd hired. By night, Tomasz catalogued something else. Names. Of Jews hidden by Gentile families. Of resistance members. Of Nazi informants. He hid records behind false spines in mutilated books. He rebound banned texts using pages of Hitler Youth manuals. He smuggled microfilm and forged identity papers inside hollowed encyclopedias. He ran a secret school for Jewish children in the basement of an abandoned print shop. Their lessons were whispered between air raids, math, history, poetry. The children knew never to speak Tomasz's name. He taught them the alphabet using burned scraps of Torah scrolls. He taught them Shakespeare, Szymborska, Goethe, and Ginsberg. He never raised his voice. In the summer of 1943, the Gestapo discovered an underground printing press distributing anti-Nazi leaflets across Galicia. The text was in perfect German, quoting Goethe. Asterisk, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Asterisk, it had Tomasz's syntax, his turns of phrase. They arrested 3 suspected partisans. 1, a courier named Alec, was tortured. He revealed a drop point, a locked drawer in the library's music archive. The Gestapo raided the library. Tomasz stood behind the reception desk, ink-stained, spine straight. They found the drawer. Inside, a copy of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 3. Nothing else. The drawer, it turned out, was part of a decoy system Tomasz had designed himself, a drawer within a drawer. The true documents were hidden beneath the floorboards, wrapped in wax paper and sealed inside a tin box labeled Boring State Tax Records, 1927. Still, they arrested him. At Gestapo headquarters, Tomasz was interrogated for 14 hours. He said nothing. Not one word. They beat him. He remained silent. One officer, frustrated, screamed, "What is your resistance made of?" Tomasz smiled through blood. Punctuation. They released him after 3 days. There wasn't enough evidence. But he knew he was being watched. So he vanished. 4 weeks, Lviv's underground assumed he'd been killed. Then, one evening, a resistance cell found a book waiting on a park bench. A tattered Polish dictionary. Inside, one page had been meticulously hollowed. Inside it, a map of a tunnel network beneath the old university. Coordinates marked in red. Next to them, a line of poetry. Asterisk, we are not the fire. We are the smoke they cannot trap. Asterisk. Tomasz had gone underground. Literally. He made his new home beneath the city in an abandoned sewer junction, where a dozen Jewish families hid in darkness. He organized lessons again, using candles and scraps of paper. He documented every missing person, every ghetto liquidation, every resistance act. His records, stored in waterproof jars, were distributed in secret caches, many of which weren't found until decades later. In the spring of 1944, the Germans began evacuating Lviv, fearing Soviet advance. Before they left, they set fire to several remaining Jewish hideouts. Tomasz's tunnel was discovered. Only one child survived. She was found wandering the street, covered in soot, clutching a burned book. Years later, she would identify Tomasz's handwriting in an archive in Krakow. The book was a poetry collection. Inside the cover, in faded ink. Asterisk, when words are forbidden, memory becomes our only language. Asterisk. After the war, his name became legend. Survivors told tales of the Librarian of Lviv, the man who archived lives while the world buried them. His fate remained unknown. Until 1991. During restoration work on the Ossolinium Library, workers uncovered a sealed alcove behind a collapsed wall in the sub-basement. Inside were hundreds of documents, birth certificates, ration cards, photographs, lists of the dead. A typewriter, a library desk, and a skeleton, seated, spine straight, hands folded. Dental records confirmed it. Tomasz Mazur. He had returned in the final weeks of the war. Injured, possibly dying. And like a librarian shelving his final book, he had sealed himself inside the archive, surrounded by the memories he refused to let be erased. Today, the Ossolinium has a dedicated hall, the Mazur Room. It contains many of the documents he preserved, a sculpture of a closed book, and an inscription on the wall. Asterisk, he said nothing. But he kept everything. Asterisk. Some ghosts don't haunt, they wait. In silence, in sealed rooms, in records too fragile to burn. The truth doesn't always scream, it whispers. And if you listen closely, it asks the question no one dares to answer. What else have we forgotten to be afraid of?